The 70s opened with a new planetary self-awareness, the first Earth Day and the creation of the Environment Protection Agency in 1970, and also the Stockholm Conference birthing in 1972, a conscience taking shape. Yet history's pulse was jagged. Vietnam ended in 1975, Watergate unseated a president, Détente signed SALT I and the Helsinki Accords, while the oil shocks of 1973 and 1979 taught the world the price of power. Science miniaturized, the microprocessor, Altair 8800, and Apple II in 1977 foreshadowed a digital future, even as Voyager 1 and 2 slipped beyond the planets to send back portraits of our fragile home. Culture swung from disco's glitter to punk's refusal and the birth of hip-hop in the Bronx, while New Hollywood, Coppola, Scorsese, Kubrick, filmed doubt with startling clarity. On paper, protection advanced, the U.S. Endangered Species Act to curb wildlife trade, and the dichlorodiphenyltrichloroethane ban in 1972 that would help raptors slowly recover. But ecosystems kept thinning. The Sahel famine revealed climate and land use fragility, Seveso and Amako Cadiz spread chemical and oil scars, and 3 Mile Island made the Adams promise tremble. Save the Whales rang across ports as the International Whaling Commission tightened rules, yet factory fleets had already quieted seas. The Arabian oryx went extinct in the wild even as captive breeding began. In the tropics, roads bit into rainforests, the Trans-Amazonian Highway, while island birds and turtles vanished on the margins, losses too local for headlines and too final for correction. Philosophers and critics, Foucault, Derrida, Sontag, questioned power and meaning. Scientists named new syndromes of collapse, activists like Greenpeace learned the theater of witness. By decade's end, the outlines of a solution existed, laws, movements, satellites, science, but so did the outline of absence. Conscience grew, yes, and still it came too late for many. The Socorro elf owl, once endemic to Mexico's Socorro Island, vanished during the 70s, marking the silent end of one of the world's smallest owls. This tiny nocturnal bird, closely related to the mainland elf owl, depended on the island's native forests of becerra trees for nesting and insect hunting. When goats and cats were introduced to Socorro, they devastated the vegetation and prey base, leaving the owl with nowhere to hide or feed. By the time biologists revisited the island in the early 70s, its haunting calls had already faded into extinction. The Mexican dace was a small leuciscid minnow endemic to the canals and streams of the Valley of Mexico, especially around Xochimilco, Tláhuac. Field records fade out around 1970, as the valley's waters were diverted, drained, and fouled by the rapid growth of Mexico City and its agriculture. Although the International Union for the Conservation of Nature now lists it as extinct, analyses place the species' final disappearance circa 1983, underscoring a drawn-out collapse rather than a single event. Its loss, alongside its congeners in the genus Avara, erased a unique piece of the Valley of Mexico's freshwater web. The endorheic chub was a tiny leuciscid fish confined to the shallow waters of Lake Chalco near Tláhuac in the Valley of Mexico. Field collections taper off around 1970, and the species is generally considered to have gone extinct by the early 80s, with 1983 often cited in syntheses. As Mexico City sprawled, drainage, groundwater extraction, and pollution destabilized Chalco's endorheic wetlands, erasing the chub's habitat piece by piece. Its disappearance left a conspicuous gap in the valley's once distinctive freshwater community. The Saudi gazelle once ranged across gravel and sandy plains with scattered acacias from Kuwait and northern Saudi Arabia down the peninsula's western flank. Uncontrolled hunting drove a rapid collapse, and the last confirmed wild records date to 1970, with the species later listed extinct in 2008. For years, hope flickered in captive collections, but genetic work showed most animals labeled Saudi gazelle were misidentified Dorcas gazelles or hybrids rather than true Saudia. Those findings, combined with repeated but fruitless surveys, cemented the conclusion that no pure Saudi gazelles survived in the wild or in captivity. Its disappearance in the 70s-era wave of Arabian extirpations left a quiet emptiness on those open stony plains where small herds once moved between thorny shade and mirages. The Clear Lake splittail was an endemic leuciscid of California's Clear Lake that migrated into tributary streams to spawn each spring. After the Mississippi silverside was introduced in 1967 and quickly exploded in numbers, on top of decades of other fish introductions, native fishes declined sharply, and stream alterations further undermined spawning runs. The last verified records of the splittail are from 1969 to early 70s, after which it vanished from surveys and is now assessed as extinct. The pagan reed warbler was confined to Pagan Island in the northern Mariana Islands, where it skulked through dense thickets and reed beds around lowland wetlands. Last reliable observations trail off by the late 70s, and repeated surveys in the 80s, 2000 and 2010 failed to relocate the bird. Although a major volcanic eruption reshaped Pagan in 1981, conservation assessments judged the warbler to have disappeared before that event. Its decline likely reflected a familiar island syndrome, small range, habitat alteration, and vulnerability to introduced predators such as rats and cats, leaving a population too small to persist. By the time it was widely recognized as distinct, the bird was already gone, and today it is listed as extinct. The acornshell was a Cumberlandian freshwater mussel confined to riffle habitats of the Tennessee and Cumberland River drainages, where it lived half buried in gravel and sand. By the late 60s, widespread damming and channel alteration had erased most of those fast-flowing shoals, setting the species on an irreversible slide. Its last known survivors were reportedly wiped out by domestic sewage pollution in the 70s, and subsequent surveys never found it again. Today the acornshell is listed as extinct, a stark emblem of how quickly specialized river mussels vanish when their currents are stilled and fouled. The western subspecies Aramomala turneri calendae occupies humid Guineo-Congolian forest from east-central Democratic Republic of Congo with an old record from far southwestern Uganda. A canopy-foraging insectivore in moist lowland and montane forest, it shares the species' placement in the Cystocolidae following modern phylogenetic work. Field information from the Calendae range is sparse, but ongoing deforestation and habitat alteration across Congo Basin forest blocks are the principal pressures flagged for Turner's Aramomala. Notably, the species as a whole is now assessed near threatened, so safeguarding remaining lowland forest fragments is critical for the persistence of the Calendae population. The Nubian wild ass, the nominate form of the African wild ass, ranged across the Nubian desert from east of the Nile to the Red Sea and south toward the Atbara River and northern Eritrea. Field reports thin out after mid-century, with the last credible sightings from aerial surveys in the 50s to 70s, the subspecies is now generally treated as presumed extinct. Its collapse is tied to uncontrolled hunting, competition with burgeoning livestock at scarce water points, and hybridization with domestic donkeys that eroded its genetic identity. Genetic work on ancient remains shows that Nubian stock contributed a major maternal lineage to domestic donkeys, whereas the Somali wild ass represents a distinct line. In life it likely looked familiar to anyone who knows a donkey, a pale gray animal with a dark dorsal stripe and a shoulder cross but no zebra-like leg striping. The Santa Cruz pupfish was confined to the upper Santa Cruz River system of southern Arizona, with its last natural stronghold at Monkey Spring in Santa Cruz County. Rapid habitat alteration and the unauthorized introduction of predatory sport fishes erased that refuge. The final wild population at Monkey Spring was reportedly eaten out. Records fade out in the early 70s, and the species was later assessed extinct in 2011. It was a compact, high-backed pupfish. Its name Arcuatus nods to the strongly convex dorsal profile, and breeding males darkened without the orange-yellow fin flashes seen in some congeners. The Titsao pterictic hornbill was the Visayan hornbill's island form, endemic to Titsao Island in the central Philippines. Contemporary accounts described it as abundant in the early 1900 years, but wholesale forest clearance and hunting on Titsao gutted its habitat through the 20th century. The last confirmed record dates to 1971, when 3 birds were collected. No subsequent surveys have found the subspecies, and it is widely regarded as extinct. Meanwhile, the parent species persists, albeit endangered, on other Visayan islands such as Panay and Negros, where remaining lowland forests still support it. If Taikensis is indeed gone, it would be one of the only hornbill taxa lost in recorded history, a stark warning about how quickly small island endemics can vanish once their forests fall. The Tecopa pupfish was an extreme heat-tolerant desert fish found only in the outflows of the North and South Tecopa hot springs in California's Mojave Desert. In the 60s the springs were enlarged for bathhouses and, in 1965, their outflows were rechanneled and merged, changes that sped the current, raised downstream temperatures, and opened the door to upstream hybridization with Amargosi while non-native bluegill and mosquito fish piled on additional pressure. The last confirmed specimens were collected on February 1970, subsequent surveys in 1972 and 1977 drew blanks, and assessments place its disappearance in the early 70s with extinction recognized by the end of that decade. The tropical acid weed, a brown alga endemic to the Galapagos, was described by Taylor in 1945 from dredged specimens collected in 1935, and is known only from deep, cold upwelled sites at Post Office Bay and Tagus Cove. The species has not been seen since 1972 despite targeted searches. Researchers suspect that the strong 1982 El Niño, which devastated Galapagos macroalgae, combined with grazer outbreaks and overfishing of predators, may have pushed the alga past recovery. If any remnant persists, it may be hidden as a cryptic gametophyte in deeper water, but the conspicuous sporophyte phase that defined this alga has vanished from modern surveys. The Mason River myrtle, a myrtaceae shrub known only from a single site along the Mason River between Clarendon and St. Ann parishes in Jamaica, vanished in the 70s. Described by the Jamaican botanist George Proctor, it was collected from that locality and never found elsewhere. Drainage and other habitat changes around the Mason River wetland erased its tiny range, and the plant has not been seen for decades. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature lists it as extinct, with the last record in 1972 and the assessment published in 1998. The bush wren was a tiny, near-flightless New Zealand wren that crept through mossy trunks and leaf litter gleaning invertebrates. Mainland populations ebbed away under pressure from introduced predators, with the last records from the North Island in 1955 and the South Island in 1968. Its final refuge on Big South Cape Island off Ricura was overrun by ship rats in 1963, triggering a rapid collapse. A desperate rescue in 1964 moved 6 Stead's bush wrens to nearby Kaimohu Island, but the translocation failed. The last known birds were gone by 1972, sealing the species' extinction. That same rat incursion also doomed the South Island snipe and greater short-tailed bat, and it became a watershed moment that spurred New Zealand's modern island biosecurity and eradication efforts. The Caspian tiger once threaded through the Tugay thickets and riverine corridors from eastern Turkey and northern Iran across the Caucasus and Central Asia to Xinjiang. Relentless hunting, prey depletion, and the draining and clearance of riparian habitat splintered these populations, with strongholds along the Amu Darya and Pianj rivers collapsing by the late 60s and the form disappearing region-wide in the early 70s. Country records tell the same story. Individuals were shot in Golestan in 1953 and Turkmenistan in 1954, an observation came from the Aral Sea area in 1968, and the population was later assessed extinct. Legal protection arrived too late, and Soviet protections and Iranian fines could not stem the loss once the big cats had been reduced to scattered relics. Genetic work shows the Caspian and Amur tigers are exceptionally close, likely fragments of a once continuous northern lineage. That finding underpins proposals to re-establish tigers in Central Asia using Amur tigers as ecological stand-ins. Kazakhstan and partners such as WWF have explored restoring tigers to the Ili Balkhash region, with feasibility studies outlining habitat and prey recovery requirements. As one of the great cats lost amid the 70s wave of regional extirpations, the Caspian tiger stands as a cautionary emblem of how quickly apex predators vanish when river systems are engineered and persecution goes unchecked. The Muria reed warbler was confined to Amoaria in French Polynesia, where it favored river valley second growth in dense stands of Polynesian bamboo. Field records dwindled through the late 20th century, with the last confirmed sighting in 1981 and only unverified reports thereafter. Conservation assessments now treat it as critically endangered, reflecting years without a documented bird despite targeted surveys. Its decline is tied to habitat disruption, hydropower works, roads and bamboo exploitation, compounded by invasive species such as Myconia, common myna and feral cats. If any survivors remain, they persist at vanishingly low density in remote thickets, a ghost of a reed warbler that once threaded Amoaria's green ravines. The Bitungu was a small cyprinid found only in Lake Lanao, Mindanao, reaching about 13 centimeters and described originally by Harry in 1924. Market and field records dry up by 1973, as Lake Lanao's native barbs collapsed amid a surge of introduced fishes, heavy exploitation, and pollution. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature now lists the species as extinct, with the assessment finalized in 2020. Its loss forms part of the unraveling of Lake Lanao's remarkable barbode species flock, an evolutionary experiment that vanished within a few decades. The bar-winged rail, a likely flightless Fijian rail of forest edges and swampy thickets, is known from a handful of 90th century specimens, last collected on Viti Levu around 1890. Despite sporadic, unconfirmed reports in the early 70s, targeted work has never relocated the species. Its disappearance is attributed to predation by introduced cats and mongooses, a fatal combination for ground-nesting island rails. The International Union treats it as extinct, closing the book on one of Fiji's most enigmatic birds. The Guadeloupe house wren was the insular house wren of Guadeloupe in the Lesser Antilles. Its last confirmed records were in late May 1973, when John Barlow documented a small colony, after which no verified sightings have followed. BirdLife now lists the Guadeloupe form as possibly extinct within the broader species account, reflecting the absence of any reliable modern records. Plausible drivers of its disappearance include predation by introduced small Indian mongooses and cats, together with habitat changes on the main islands, pressures known to have precipitated other Guadeloupean vertebrate declines. In the space of a few years around the 70s, a once overlooked island songbird slipped from view, leaving only museum specimens and brief field notes to mark its place in the archipelago's fauna. The Lake Lanao barb was an endemic cyprinid of Mindanao's ancient Lake Lanao and once figured in local markets as a food fish. Records peter out in the 70s, often cited as last seen in 1974, and now the species as extinct. Its collapse tracks the broader unraveling of the Lake Lanao species flock under overfishing, habitat degradation, pollution, and competition/predation from introduced fishes. By 2020 it was one of 15 Lanao endemics formally declared extinct, a stark ledger of losses from a single lake. The Vanua levu long-legged thicket bird was the northern Fijian subspecies, a furtive, long-tailed, long-legged ground forager in dense, stream-side forest on Vanua levu. It was only discovered in 1974 and has not been seen since, leading most authorities to treat it as possibly extinct while the nominate rufus survives on Viti levu. Typical pressures for this species complex, introduced predators such as small Indian mongoose and black rat and localized logging of old-growth forest, are considered the most plausible drivers of its disappearance. Taxonomically, the group has shifted among genera, but the fate of Clunii remains the same, a brief appearance in the 70s and then silence. If it still persists, it does so at vanishing density in remote thickets where even targeted surveys have failed to relocate it. The Flores luens rail is known from just a handful of specimens from West Flores, first described by Hartert. Its last verified record was revised from 1959 to 1974, and despite multiple visits by ornithologists and birders since, no confirmed sightings have followed. Historical material and site notes point to dense, reedy wet margins, rice fields, streams, and the shores around Lake Sanon Goang and the rutting area, habitats where secretive rails can easily go undetected. Accordingly, the taxon is often treated as possibly extinct since the mid-late 20th century, yet specialists still recommend targeted searches in these microhabitats in case a remnant persists. The Aragua robber frog is a Venezuelan endemic first known from Rancho Grande in Henri Pittier National Park. It inhabited humid montane forest near streams, a microhabitat typical for several northern Venezuelan pristomantis. After decades without verified records, the species is listed as possibly extinct. Given its tiny known range and the broader degradation of cloud forest edges in the region, habitat loss and chronic disturbance are considered the most plausible drivers of its disappearance. If it has truly gone, a distinct element of Venezuela's montane herpetofauna has vanished with it. In the 70s, several Lake Lanao barbs in the genus Barbodes winked out. Landings and market surveys from 1974 to 1977 documented precipitous declines, and subsequent checks failed to relocate these fishes. Their collapse is tied to a familiar cocktail in Lake Lanao: heavy fishing, pollution, and especially introduced fishes that rewired the food web. Most of these endemics were formally assessed as extinct. In the space of a few years, an entire species flock, once central to local culture and markets, disappeared from a single ancient lake. The round island burrowing boa, a slender, multi-keeled, fossorial snake endemic to tiny round island off Mauritius, was last reliably recorded in 1975 and is now listed as extinct. Its downfall tracks the island's wholesale vegetation collapse and severe soil erosion after goats and rabbits were introduced, stripping cover and desiccating the loose soils this boa used for shelter. Although conservationists later removed the invasive herbivores, that rescue came too late for Bolieria. The closely related round island keel-scaled boa survived and has rebounded under habitat recovery, underscoring how timing can decide a lineage's fate. In the end, Bolieria vanished in the 70s, a casualty of rapid ecological unraveling on one of the Indian Ocean's most battered islets. The longjaw cisco was a deep-water cisco of the Great Lakes, typically netted from around 100 meters and named for Alpena, in Michigan. The commercial deep-water chub fishery once sold it as smoked herring, but landings collapsed. None appeared in catches after 1967, and Ontario's last record came from Georgian Bay in 1975. Its demise is linked to overfishing, pollution, and food web disruption following the invasion of sea lamprey. The taxon is now regarded as extinct, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has formally listed it as delisted due to extinction. The phantom shiner was a small, translucent minnow endemic to the warm, lowland reaches of the Rio Grande from central New Mexico to Tamaulipas. Its final confirmed record is a single adult taken July 1975, about 4 kilometers below Ciudad Diaz Ordaz, after which repeated surveys through the 90s failed to find it. Hydrologic alteration, dams, water diversions, pollution and irrigation-driven salinity increase, together with introduced fishes likely drove its rapid decline after mid-century. The species is now assessed extinct on major lists, with modern summaries noting it was already presumed gone by the mid-90s. The Jalpa False Brook salamander was a lungless salamander endemic to the broadleaf cloud forests west of Cerro Miramundo, Guatemala, where it lived in damp rotting logs, beetle burrows and bromeliads around 2,500 meters. Known from mid-20th century collections and a scattering of historical notes, the species' last verified record was in 1976, after which repeated surveys failed to relocate it. Habitat loss from logging and livestock conversion likely undercut the tiny population, and modern assessments now treat it as extinct. Its passing is one of the few salamander extinctions formally confirmed by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature's Global Amphibian Reassessment. The Mexican grizzly bear ranged through the Sierra Madre Occidental of Chihuahua, Sonora and Durango. Its holotype was taken near Colonia Garcia, Chihuahua, in 1899, and by mid-century the population had shrunk to a few isolated mountain blocks north of Chihuahua City. Ranching conflicts and predator control campaigns, trapping, poisoning and shooting, drove a rapid contraction long before formal protection could matter. Contemporary accounts suggested perhaps 30 bears remained by about 1960, already fragmented beyond easy recovery. The last widely accepted records cluster in the early 60s, and by 1964 the form was generally regarded as extinct. Subsequent rumors sparked searches, but they never yielded a viable population. A 1976 shooting in Sonora likely involved a brown bear, yet even that report underscores how any remnant, if real, was a lone wanderer rather than a surviving nucleus. Ecologically, the bears were omnivores of pine-oak uplands and temperate grasslands, feeding heavily on plants and insects and known locally as el oso platidou for their grizzled coats. In the end, the Mexican grizzly's disappearance, functionally complete by the early 70s, stands as a textbook case of how intense persecution and landscape change can erase a large mammal in a few decades. The Abbott's chat tanager was the Gonave Island form of the eastern chat tanager, confined to semi-arid scrub and thickets near sea level off Haiti's west coast. Field notes and specimen records ceased in the 70s, with widely cited last records in 1977 and no verified sightings since despite limited surveys. Deforestation and land conversion on Gonave, especially woodcutting for charcoal and clearing of dry scrub, are considered the primary pressures that erased its tiny range. Most authorities now treat a body as probably extinct, while the species persists on the Hispaniolan mainland and other subspecies. The Colombian grebe was confined to the Bogotá high Andean wetlands, with its final stronghold at Lake Tota, where it nested and fed among open pondweed beds. After steep declines in the 60s, the last confirmed record was in 1977, intensive surveys in 1982 failed to find any birds, and the species is now treated as extinct. Its collapse is linked to wetland drainage, siltation, and eutrophication that destroyed submergent Potamogeton vegetation, with introduced fishes and hunting likely compounding the fall. Taxonomically it has often been considered close to the black-necked grebe, differing in its rufous foreneck and more orange-toned ear tufts. The grebe's disappearance stands as a stark example of how rapid, human-driven changes to Andean lakes can erase an endemic in just a few decades. The EIAO monarch was a small monarch flycatcher confined to the island of EIAO in the Marquesas, where it occupied dry to moist lowland forest and shrubland. The last reliable record dates to 1977, and it is now assessed as extinct. Its collapse is attributed to introduced predators and severe habitat degradation from sheep grazing, with possible disease effects linked to introduced chestnut-breasted manakins. Taxonomically, the bird was long treated as a subspecies of the Iphis monarch before being recognized as a distinct species. The rye-lip robber frog was a Guatemalan microendemic known only from its type locality and from a single specimen. That lone individual was collected in 1978. After numerous unsuccessful surveys, it has been reclassified as extinct in 2020. The habitat at the site has been destroyed by agriculture, and while chytrid fungus has devastated many related frogs, its role here remains uncertain. Its vanishing, documented only once, underscores how quickly single-site, direct developing Central American frogs can be lost from cloud forest fragments. The white-eyed river martin is one of only 2 river martins, a highly distinctive swallow lineage noted for its stout bill and unusually robust feet. Discovered at Bueng Boraphet, in Thailand, in 1968 by Kitty Thonglongia, it was first seen alive in the wild only in 1977. The last confirmed Thai records fall in 1978, and despite targeted surveys in Thailand and neighboring countries, no verified sightings have followed. Its breeding range remains unknown. Hypotheses point to forested river valleys with sandbars, and its heavy feet and toe proportions have even prompted suggestions of divergent nesting habits compared with its African relative. Now listed as possibly extinct, the species suffered from trapping at roosts and broader riverine habitat disturbance. It is protected under Thailand's non-hunting designation at Bueng Boraphet, but those safeguards likely arrived too late. The San Felipe Hutia was discovered in 1970 and is known only from the tiny Cayo Juan Garcia in the Cayos de San Felipe, off southwestern Cuba. A large series was taken there during the 70s, with the last confirmed record in 1978 when 43 individuals were collected. Subsequent surveys in the 80s and in 2003 failed to find any survivors. Plausible drivers of its collapse include invasive mammals, especially abundant black rats, fires that damaged the cay's vegetation, and passed overhunting. Taxonomically, the species was described by Varona and Garrido, and modern compendia still restrict its range to that single cay. The Yunnan lake newt, a fully aquatic salamandrid, was restricted to the vegetated shallows and adjacent wetlands of Jianxi Lake in Yunnan. Despite targeted searches, it was last seen in 1979 and later listed as extinct. Its decline closely tracked the lake's rapid eutrophication and pollution from urban growth, sewage, and industrial effluent, which transformed once productive marshy margins. Additional pressure came from habitat reclamation and introduced fishes, which further disrupted the shallow water food web the species depended upon. Today the Yunnan lake newt survives only in jars and field notes, a cautionary emblem of how fast a single lake endemic can vanish when a closed basin is overwhelmed. The Mount Glorious Day frog was a small, diurnal torrent dweller confined to the Blackall, Conondale and Degwiller ranges of southeast Queensland. Populations vanished range by range through the 70s, with the last confirmed sighting in 1979 and the species later listed extinct. Its precipitous crash is widely linked to chytridiomycosis, likely compounded by stream disturbance and feral pigs that muddied breeding creeks. For a frog whose life unfolded on boulder-choked rainforest streams, its disappearance became an early warning of the disease-driven wave that would sweep Australian upland amphibians.